Welcome to Healthcare Matters, bringing you the latest insights and innovations shaping the future of healthcare. Today's episode is powered by Arab Health in partnership with Leader Healthcare. I'm your host, Peter Birch, and today we're joined by Nirmal Kumar, Managing Director for Leader Life Sciences and Leader Biotech Pharma, and Dr. Hinda Daggag, Director, Healthcare Advisory Dubai at PwC, to discuss the advancements in genomics and precision medicine, so personalised treatments, gene editing technologies, the ethical considerations, and a lot more too. Hello, Dr. Daggag and Nirmal.
Hello.
Hi, Peter.
It's great to have you here on the podcast. I'd love to learn a little bit more about yourself so we can, before we dive into the conversation today. So I might start with you, Nirmal. Can you tell us a bit about your work at Leader Healthcare and how it connects to the life sciences and biotech world?
Thank you very much, Peter, first of all, and thanks in Pharma for this great opportunity to be part of this wonderful podcast with Dr. Hinda. I am Nirmal Kumar, the Managing Director of Leader Life Sciences. It's a spin-off of Leader Healthcare Group. So we, as an organization, are a scientific solution provider across 10 countries in the Middle East. Basically, we cater to innovative technologies to hospitals, healthcare centers, labs, R&D, biotech, and pharma. So our idea is to bring in novel technologies to this part of the world, enhance the research and the therapeutic outcomes. That's the whole idea.
Excellent. Thanks for that scene setter. And Dr. Hinda, what's your focus at PwC Healthcare Advisory, particularly on the genomics and precision medicine side?
So as you know, my background is genomics. I've got a PhD in human genetics, and that's pretty much what I've done for most of my career, really. And my role at PwC is really to enable PwC to deliver, I guess, collaboratively on various projects that design and implement strategies to position organizations, whether they are government, private organizations, to position them as leaders in precision medicine by leveraging the power of genomics.
Yeah, it's an exciting area, and what better people to have here on this conversation to understand it a little bit more. So, Nirmal, at Leader Group, can you tell us a bit more about how you're seeing the advancements in genomics and precision medicine and how they're transforming the way we think about delivering treatments for patients?
That's definitely an interesting question because, just to retrospect things, it all started decades back. We looked at histomorphology, say more of let's say a biopsy, right? So we understand the morphology and take a decision on the treatment. Then it moved on to PCR with advancements of technologies, and then we looked into a molecular level, understanding about the whole scenario. And then now with next generation sequencing, it turned out to be a different ballgame altogether. So from a one size fits all concept right now to more of a customized, personalized approach, not just on the medication part, also on the therapy part, where we are having great insights with the advancements of technology thanks to that, and where the doctors, the decision makers, the clinical practice itself have come to a level where we have tons of data and insights to take the right decision, and especially more personalized, more specific to that particular disease of concern.
Yeah, no, look, that point, Nirmal, about personalized treatments is particularly important and probably one of the big promises of genomics. Dr. Hinda, can you take us through how genomic testing is helping us provide more targeted and effective treatments for patients, especially when you take into consideration diverse regions like the Middle East?
So I think maybe the point we start off with is the fact that when we talk about personalized medicine, this is not just about treatment, that it really kind of goes beyond the scope of treatment. So what we are seeing in the last, let's say, 10 years, that the healthcare systems are kind of moving from a reactive healthcare to a more of a predictive and preventative healthcare. Now, the biggest results or examples that we've seen is in the treatment area, specifically with cancer treatment, where we are able to design much more targeted therapies by understanding really the individual and the tumor's genetic makeup to do that. However, this is reflected in other aspects of healthcare, being prevention, prediction, diagnosis, and treatment. So you can really kind of see it from start to finish. And when we are thinking about prevention or prediction, for example, we can take an example of polygenic risk scores and how we are now able to actually calculate risks for individuals based on their genetic makeup and other individual data that we have access to kind of understand what is their predisposition to certain chronic diseases, such as potentially diabetes and cardiovascular disorders. When we talk about prevention, we now have implementation of screening programs, such as premarital screening program, for example, in the Middle East. And this is a perfect example of a program that is implemented in specific countries that have a specific genetic diversity and unique healthcare challenges that stem from different elements, and one of them being cultural, probably. And the fact that we can now implement the premarital screening and we can identify certain mutations and predispositions in couples prior to their marriage allows us to obviously have a very active approach to their health and have planning, in advance to even in terms of the family planning. So this is all gonna long-term have a positive impact on the prevalence of specific diseases. And in this case, we're talking about rare diseases, but also an overall positive impact on the healthcare of a country and the population. So these are just some of the examples of where you can see kind of the implementation of genomics and precision medicine in healthcare.
Yeah, that use as a predictive or a preventive tool seems super important, because it's one thing for us to retrospectively report on public health or anything, and that's interesting. But I think that real use and utility of something like genomic testing and in this area is super important. There's different technologies that I'm aware of that you both have much more familiarity in terms of their utilization. One thing I think of in terms of on-trend or emerging technologies in this space is something like CRISPR, which I from what I know is it's fascinating, but probably still quite early in adoption. I'd love to hear from both of you, perhaps starting with Nirmal, just to know, like, what's your take on say these types of new technologies like CRISPR, how they're shaping disease treatment and prevention?
Well, it's so fascinating, the whole concept of precision medicine or the personalized therapies and treatment itself, because just to give an example, that oncology, cancer, say let's take lung cancer for that matter. Earlier, it was more of a shotgun method. The treatment was like, okay, diagnosed with lung cancer, there's a specific treatment, the specific SOPs that will be followed. But later, with advancements and more insights on the disease itself, that now we identified, okay, genes like EGFR and KRAS are responsible. Okay, there are treatments and there are medications for those, treating those, specific genes which causes cancer, specifically lung cancer. And now with so much of advancements, sequencing, the genomics, insights have given us an idea which specific SNP, we call it mutation, is responsible for causing in that particular gene. So that becomes more precise. We are addressing not just the gene which is responsible, but also a specific mutation which is causing the disease condition itself. So in that context, as a follow-up, CRISPR is a magical tool where we can technically alter that particular mutation and then make it right? So something like, when we are looking at genetic disorders, example, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, or cystic fibrosis. Sickle cell is a major disease burden in this part of the world. where if we could alter one particular mutation in a particular gene, that will really reprograms the whole disease outcome, treatment therapy outcome. So that not just limited to that, but also we can go one step more and reprogram the immune cells which target specific tumors. So it becomes all the more very interesting and fascinating, the concept itself. But I mean, having said that, pros and cons and challenges are always there. We always face this gap between the bench to bedside, from research to the clinical, approach. Still, I would say it's evolving. It's in vitro. It's like well taken, but in the clinical front, it's coming up, and there's a lot of research going around it on immunotherapies and CRISPR Cas9 technology applications. Wonderful, but yeah, I mean, things are going the right direction. It's a really great, fascinating tool for us to change the dynamics.
Well, no, you're right, and Nirmal kind of raised this point that whilst a lot of this sounds transformative and great, and it's super encouraging, the translation from lab to bedside, actually seeing some of these solutions in practice is another thing. Hinda, I'd love your perspective on how we start to see some of these tools reach their full potential in the day-to-day practice.
I mean, in all honesty, when we kind of, on a grand scheme of things, when we think about precision medicine and the promise of precision medicine that we've been talking about for the past 10, 15 years, I think all of us expected that the movement is going to be quicker, that we're going to get there quicker in terms of implementing precision medicine and in terms of healthcare systems adoption of precision medicine into practice. And there are various reasons why it's taking so long, and we can talk about these. But for me, on a personal level, gene editing technologies such as CRISPR is something that is absolutely fascinating, because I think it is completely transforming our approach to disease treatment. When we think about genetic disorders, for at least most of my life, I was considering that there will never be really treatments for genetic disorders. It is something, it's kind of something that you just take in. You have a genetic disorder, you can manage it, you can improve the quality of life of an individual, but to actually treat it, I don't think that we really thought that it's going to be possible. So the fact that we got to that point, and that kind of technologically we have advanced so much, and scientifically, that we now do have these gene editing technologies and that have curative purpose, basically, is absolutely amazing. I think that we have moved very fast in this area, from kind of the concept to implementation. Of course, there are some challenges, because obviously you don't know really the long-term safety and efficacy of these kind of approaches, let's say. But there's always some sort of a price to pay. But when you think about the fact that these days we can utilize CRISPR for an N equals 1, meaning that you can literally individualize a treatment for one person. So you actually, can change and amend the genetic, let's say, architecture, whether it's just a mutation or whether you can correct that mutation or edit the mutation for an individual. It's not even a group of people. So it is absolutely amazing. But one thing to keep in mind is, of course, that with this come high costs. So the cost of actually developing these applications and administering. So I think that right now the biggest barrier is probably the cost across the globe, wherever you look at it. Regulations around it. So creating that regulatory framework to ensure patient safety always comes first is also another thing that we need to keep in mind. And like we said, like that long-term safety, efficacy, and any kind of ethical challenges that come with that. So we have something absolutely amazing on our hands, but yes, there are still some challenges that need to be resolved.
Yeah, no, that unpacks a few interesting points I want to dive into further, Dr. Hinda, because yeah, you're right. There's the transactional reality of, there's a cost involved, there's the commercial elements, there's legislative requirements, there's the rules that surround things. But as you say, but the technological barriers that we have, they're starting to kind of come down. So now we're kind of left with this question of, we can, but I guess there are probably a lot of healthcare leaders, particularly in the Middle East, thinking, well, just because we can, does that mean we should? To your point around, we haven't had this opportunity before, and often people might accept that, this is their predisposition. This is just how they're made. And like you suggest too, everyone is in this age of multi-comorbidities and the uniqueness of everybody's genetic makeup, but we've got the ability to really kind of pinpoint down treatments. So I guess that brings up those ethical questions that are not an easy one to address, but they're gonna come to the forefront. I'd love to understand a little bit more from you, Dr. Hinda. What are those, if you were to kind of unpack those a little bit more, those key ethical questions that are being raised right now in the landscape, and how should healthcare leaders in the Middle East navigate these tricky questions?
So I think whatever challenges, healthcare leaders in the Middle East are facing are fairly similar to challenges that globally healthcare leaders are facing. I think that when we think about genetics, or when we think about our genes, my own genes or my own genetic makeup, there is a personal relationship. This is part of who you are, what makes you you, alongside other factors. I'm not saying that it's just about genetics, but it is very unique to you. And I think this raises the major concern around the patient privacy and data security, and maybe not patient, individuals. Because when we think about precision medicine, the applications go beyond just kind of that patient relationship. It's on an individual level. So I think there is it's a sensitive nature of genetic information. We all consider it something that belongs to us. So the individual's privacy and data security is a very big element of this. So how do you overcome that challenge, as a nation, as a healthcare leader, whether it's going to be the approach through building the right infrastructures and building the right security kind of framework, for the data access and data storage. We need to think about the regulatory aspects and building the right regulatory framework around it, so that individuals really feel comfortable and safe, right, when they do provide their genomic material or data. So I think this is number one. Number two is that there are a lot of challenges around incidental findings. So nowadays, because kind of doing genetic testing, for whatever reasons, for diagnostic purposes, for your health optimization purposes, whatever it might be, when we do genetic testing, when we do whole exome, whole genome sequencing, we might identify certain things that are not really the primary reason for us doing the testing. So these are usually called incidental findings, So what do you do with those? Do you have an obligation to inform the individual about them? What if they don't want to know? What if the incidental finding is not clinically actionable? So there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it, from a clinical perspective. So these kind of intricacies need to really be worked out from the get-go, and this usually would be done through the consenting, right, of the individuals, and really educating them so that they really know what they're getting into, and what are the different kind of implications of these results being basically released to them. So I think that's number two. And maybe number three, I would say, would be the health disparities. Like we were talking about the CRISPR, and the gene editing technology and access. So does everybody really have access to these, cutting edge advancements in precision medicine, or even something as simple than now that we consider it as simple as genetic testing or whole genome sequencing? It might be for us here because we are very lucky, to be where we are and to have access, to all of that. But that is not the case globally. So I think we really need to think carefully about the health disparities, because the last thing we want to do is kind of increase that socioeconomic gaps between different groups. We need to think about ways of decreasing it.
Yeah, absolutely right, and that's that can be a big concern, particularly in new emerging technologies that have great potential for having an impact, but often the areas where it needs to have the impact the most is parts where they may not be able to access such technologies. So those are all great. What's good in this conversation is that for Nirmal, the fact that we know that Leader Group are bringing precision medicine innovations to the forefront, but also we know in healthcare that this is a team sport. You can't do it all as a single organization. So tell me more about the collaborations that you need to do to be able to do some of this, like bringing together the industry leaders, healthcare providers, policymakers, and everyone to actually make these advancements more accessible.
It's all about the ecosystem, isn't it? So when we look at it, say, for example, the region, not just the region, the Middle East I'm talking about, across the globe, the drive towards running a genome program, the nationwide genome program is of the top priority. And it's not different here. And we've seen genome programs being rolled over in UAE, Saudi, Qatar, and then many other Middle Eastern countries have adopted that. So the idea here is to understand the genetic makeup to a different dimensions, the different facets to it. And it's not just limited to genomics only. Now we are talking a bigger, much broader spectrum called omics itself. So omics is branches out to genomics, which we study the genes, and proteomics. It's more into the protein functional aspects of things, because that's the ultimate insight that we get out of a functional aspect. And then moving on to metabolomics, it's again understanding the metal ions in your system. So combined together, it gives a great power. So the region is driving towards the direction that will enhance not just the treatment diagnostics, but also drug discovery process itself. Say, for example, these insights can cut 40% of the cost or time in a drug discovery process, which technically means a drug to be identified or like launched in a period of 10 years with billions of dollars. A reduction of 40% is an amazing equation in terms of time and then money. So in this context that we always wanted to align with the region and the global initiatives. And in that context, be it genomics, that we have tools, we have automation, AI-driven technologies that we are providing to different labs to entirely streamline and automate the workflow. And that goes on to sequencing as well. And then proteomics is interesting tools and technologies that we are introducing to the ecosystems, not just an individual, but also governmental initiatives that we are closely working with. And also the metabolomics and the biobanking. Biobanking is the need of the hour at this point in time, where all your millions of samples that you're sequencing had to be archived, where this is it's a greatest reserve for us to enhance the whole concept of this personalized medicine. So in this context, we have tools and technologies and the expertise to provide, facilitate, and work closely with the ecosystem. So that's exactly what we are doing, and that's how we are day in and day out interacting with the scientific community in taking the translational research and the diagnostics and healthcare system to the next level. That's the major agenda, focus for Leader Group altogether.
Yeah, got you. Look, and I reflect on this space in particular and how much has evolved quickly over a 5-10 year period, because 5-10 years is quick in healthcare. But then if I'm a healthcare leader or executive thinking in advance and planning and about like what the next 5-10 years might look like, I'm going to think it's going to be more challenging because, at the exponential rate in which things are evolving and how quickly we can move in terms of the technology, that's one aspect of it, but with that needs to come all of the other elements that I think Hinda and Nirmal have both kind of touched on too, that need to come along as well. I'd love to hear from you both, perhaps starting with Dr. Hinda. What should, over the next kind of 5-10 years, if we're in that planning mode and thinking about the role of genomics and precision medicine and how that's going to evolve healthcare, how should healthcare leaders be, what should we be focusing on now to ensure that we are ready for the future?
Well, I think, Peter, just like you said, the technology and the science is moving at such a fast pace that, it's how do governments and healthcare systems catch up, and how can we actually implement, how do we translate all of that into implementation? And we already touched on the topic of kind of these advancements in genomics technologies, such as the whole genome sequencing, polygenic risk scores, gene editing. Obviously all of these are enablers really for earlier disease detection, treatment, prevention, and prediction. And like Nirmal said, I think we have now started slowly looking at the bigger picture. I mean, the focus is so much on genomics, but in reality, there are other data sources, let's say, and it cannot just be about genomics. So we are moving kind of from that niche area into multi-omics now, and we are adding to it the proteomics, the transcriptomics, the metabolomics, all of these different areas that, by the way, all produce such rich data, and I think perhaps this is kind of one of the big challenges that we're going to face, is that we have all of these technologies that are giving us so much data, but what are we going to do with that data? Like, where do we go with it? How do we interpret it? Do we have the right infrastructures for it? Are we capable of kind of scaling up? How are we collecting it, storing it, analyzing it? What are the security, sort of privacy and security measures that are being put in place? So I think these are the things, that the healthcare leaders are really going to have to think about. So addressing the regulatory aspects, the ethical aspects, and like we said, the access challenges are probably going to be the focus now, because now we can do all of this. We have the technology. Okay, so how do we build the right ecosystem and the right framework to really utilize and leverage everything that we are producing?
Yeah, I think Dr. Hinda summed that up really well. But Nirmal, was there anything else that you'd add for those in that kind of stage now?
I totally agree with Dr. Hinda. It's all about transforming and then putting things together. It's basically what we are foreseeing is that the concept of genomics or the multi-omics itself coming into clinical practice as yet another thing, right? It's like it comes as a routine in each and every hospital. Each and every diagnostic labs will be running a series of sequences and sequencing, and diagnostics became very common. So that's something that what we're looking at. At the same time, it also it's a matter of cutting costs and making it viable. The payer provider equations had to come in. So not many genetic sequencing or the diagnostic tests are covered by the insurance. This is a global scenario. So those are some of the balances that had to come in. And once we strike that, genomics in clinical practice will be a game changer. So someone, having the data in hand and getting a treatment more precise and more personalized, it's the ultimate achievement, ultimate aim for a scientific community and all the healthcare systems here working towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're in this environment. We've got all the omics that are transforming at supersonic speed. So it's if there was a piece of advice that you'd give to wrap up this conversation, then, or a key takeaway, or something to leave kind of with the healthcare professionals or organizations that are looking to embrace genomics and precision medicine in what they do, and it may be about overcoming some of the challenges or seizing the opportunities. What would that key takeaway be, Nirmal?
As we say that change is the only constant, right? So after COVID, it was a learning for us that everything was like 4x, 5x in terms of advancements, developments, and then the innovation. A lot of interest or focus investments happen across the globe into technological investments and also R&D practices. So that really helped us to the dynamics have really changed, and it's all about adopting to those niche innovative advancements. As a healthcare practitioner, and the ecosystem itself will be a game changer. If we are reluctant to look into those improvisations and evolutions in a very short term, that is where the problem starts. So bottom line, we as a provider and the ecosystem is pretty much open and ready to accept those changes and those disruptions on a positive note, to really create a transformational impact in the healthcare systems. That's the whole idea. We should be ready for the change.
Yeah, got you. Strong message. And Dr. Hinda, what about you?
I think, besides the factors that we already kind of discussed, I would say building national level strategies for precision medicine is essential, really, to ensure that alignment across the healthcare systems and to be able to streamline really the efforts and maximize the impact. And what this kind of national level strategy needs to include would be the focus on collaborative governance. So we know that everybody has to be part of it, whether you are an academic or a healthcare provider or a payer or a regulator, everybody has a part to play in it. Focus on infrastructure development, as we spoke earlier. This becomes very important when we're talking about the data that we are producing. Workforce readiness. So we need to ensure that our workforce also is going to be able to actually, handle this shift and transformation that's happening, and they are equipped properly for this. So the trainings that need to take place, standardized guidelines that will kind of be streamlined across all the different healthcare stakeholders, let's say, to make it easier. I would say incentivizing adoption as kind of a point that Nirmal also discussed from a reimbursement perspective. So you need to create the reimbursement framework that will actually allow for adoption of precision medicine in the healthcare systems. And perhaps last but not least would be the public engagement. It is so important to keep this conversation going with the public, to involve them in it, because at the end of the day, it starts from the public, it goes back to the public. That is kind of I don't want to say the patient-centric, but let's say the individual-centric approach that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's right. They're the right things to do. And it's such an exciting area of development that's moving so quickly. And as an ecosystem in healthcare, we've got this great opportunity to each shape the potential of it being, put in the right hands and have those transformative impacts that we talk about. So, and I feel like this conversation plays a small part in progressing us to that future. So, look, Nirmal Kumar and Dr. Hinda Daggag, I really appreciate you making the time for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you, Nirmal. It was lovely to actually do this with you. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you very much, Peter, and thanks, Dr. Hinda. It's definitely a pleasure interacting, science in the forum.
And thank you so much for tuning in to Healthcare Matters. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you stay at the forefront of healthcare insights that matter. This episode was powered by Arab Health in partnership with Leader Healthcare. I'll see you next time.